I'm Jasmine Al-Gamal, and this is The View from Here. In part 2 of the Muslims in America episode, I spoke to local New York historian, City University of New York professor, and small business owner Asad Dandia, who made history himself when he sued the New York Police Department in 2013 after they sent an informant to spy on his community. In doing so, Asad helped change the course of New York history. We spoke about his journey as well as his work helping to get Zohran Mamdani elected as the first Muslim mayor of New York, and what the future holds for our beloved city. Asad Dandia, welcome to The View from Here. Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me. It's an honor and a pleasure to be here with you, Jasmine.
It's an honor for me too. I've been trying to get you on for a while now, and I've been really excited to talk to you. To me, you embody so much of what I love about New York. You are Mr. New York in my mind. Your name is Asad from New York City on social media, and your love for the city, your belief in the promise of the city really shines through in everything that you do, including the tour company that you have that takes people across New York City and looks at the different immigrant communities that built the city. It's such a beautiful thing. But I want to start by just placing you for the audience, for people listening, and placing your journey in New York as a New Yorker, but also as a Muslim New Yorker, because you have quite a fascinating story, Asad. For those who don't know, in March 2012, you were 20 years old, right? And you were targeted
19.
by
19 going on 20.
19
Yeah.
going on 20. You were targeted on Facebook by someone who reached out to you saying that he wanted to try to become a better Muslim and got in that way and turned out to be an informant for the NYPD, the New York Police Department. You ended up suing the New York Police Department for that and for the broader act of surveillance of Muslim communities in New York, and you won. You won that settlement. And then in 2017, you wrote an article. It was titled, "I was a Muslim teen under NYPD surveillance, but now I have more hope than ever." You wrote that even though you were scared to put this lawsuit out and what the reaction might be, you actually said, "My fears were proven wrong. Our lawsuit against the NYPD has led to a strong settlement proposal, and my community is readier than ever for the mounting challenges facing American Muslims today." Take us through that period of time, what you went through back then, what you meant when you said you were readier than ever to face the challenges of the community, and how you face those challenges leading to today.
It's so wild hearing back words that I wrote when I was 24 years old. It feels like many lifetimes ago. Before I begin, I just want to thank you for this invitation and to be here with you on this platform. I've been following your work and your writing and your thoughts on the Middle East longer than I can remember. So it's a great privilege to be here with you. And like you, I'm from New York. And like you, much of my identity was formed in the crucible of 9/11 and its impact on New York's Muslim, South Asian, and Arab communities. My family immigrated to this city from Pakistan, from South Asia in the early 1980s as a blue-collar worker, no college education, and eventually goes back to the motherland, gets married to my mother, brings her over here. And I grew up in the type of kind of immigrant ethnic enclave that is very common in New York and very quintessentially New York, in that it's a type of neighborhood where your school, your doctor, your pharmacy, your supermarket, your ethnic restaurants, your small businesses, your park, all of these things are within a 10-block radius of you. There are people who live in the neighborhood that don't ever have to leave it for 20, 30 years of their lives. It's very tight-knit. And this may sound extraordinary, but here in New York, that's how it's been for so many immigrant communities going back 200 years. And when I was a teenager, I was very keenly aware that I grew up in a community that was not necessarily at the center of the New York story, not necessarily the type of neighborhood that comes to your mind when you think of New York City, right? It was not the New York of Seinfeld and Sex and the City and Friends and, these other sitcoms. It was a New York that was quite literally on the margins or on the outskirts of kind of the center of Manhattan. And many of the people in my neighborhood were poor. They were undocumented. Maybe they weren't receiving government assistance as a result, or they didn't know how to navigate the bureaucracy of city government to receive the help they needed. And so my friends and I, we co-founded a charity organization that came to be known as Muslims Giving Back, with the goal and objective of alleviating some of those needs that our community members had, primarily of which was food insecurity. We're all teenagers, 18, 19-year old. It's not like we're working big professional jobs, raking in a lot of cash. We were mostly just working internships or getting allowances from our parents. And we chip in maybe $10, $20 each, and maybe 10 of us. And we'd go out and buy rice and chickpeas and beans and feminine products, if necessary, or anything else that we felt that these working class and poor families might need. And every Friday after the Jummah, the Friday prayers, we would meet in front of our local mosque, and we'd go out, we'd do what we'd call feedings or distributions. It blossomed into something much bigger. We'd advertise our work on Facebook. This is back when teenagers used Facebook, aging myself a little bit. And we would have everyone in our local community would like our posts and share our posts. And elders saw what we were doing, and they would donate to our work, which made it a lot easier for us to kind of scale up, because community elders who were much more established could give us X amount of money, and we'd say, oh, wow, this is great. We can buy 6 months worth of rice for families. So while elders would help support us financially, young people would be our foot soldiers, if you will. These would be the people. These are mostly young South Asian, Arab, Black, Muslim men, but also many women as well, who were like, all of us were inspired by our faith. All of us were inspired by committing service for our city and for our community. And people would message me all the time, hey, Asad, you're doing great work. I want to get involved. Is there some way I can help? And the best way to help would be direct service. Show up to the Friday prayers, meet my friends. We're going to go out and do some food deliveries afterwards. Are you ready to do that? And people would be ready to do that right away. And a young man in March of 2012, also of South Asian descent, sends me a DM and says he wants to get involved. He got kicked out of school. He was facing mental health challenges. And to kind of come back from that, it helps to be involved in community service work. So I said, yeah, of course, come down, meet my friends, my family, and get involved. And that's exactly what he did. He was commuting over an hour away from me. New York is a big city, and we all commute via subway. And he was over an hour away from me, but I said, come down, I'll introduce you to people. And he participated in all of our activities, including not just the charity, but our organizing works. This is an era that, Jasmine, I'm sure you're very familiar with. It was the Arab Spring. We're talking early 2010.
Yeah.
So this is 2012 right now. And we're seeing uprisings in Syria, Tunisia, Egypt, and other parts of the Arabic-speaking world. And all of us are so inspired by it. We're seeing the movements for democracy coming from the ground up. Everyday people who look like us, who are out in the streets, standing up to some of the most authoritarian regimes in the world. Internationally, it was the Arab Spring. Domestically, right here in New York, we had Occupy Wall Street, which gave rise to the movement, the contemporary movement for economic justice and equality. We are the 99%. That language that we use today came out of that movement. So we're like teenagers developing our political consciousness, coupling that together with service, and we're all just so excited. And so this young man, he becomes part of that world with us. And after about 7 or 8 months, in October of 2012, I'm coming home from a food delivery, and someone tells me, check Facebook because something big just happened. And I'm like, what? So my friend and I were in a car. He stopped his car, and I check Facebook, and I read a confession from the same young man who had DM'd me saying, I was an informant sent by the NYPD to investigate terrorism. I'm coming out to confess. The 2-paragraph long confession. And at that moment, like, I remember there was a long silence between my friend and I. We started saying our prayers, and like we were so shocked by it that we were left without words. That here was somebody who had integrated themselves into our friends circle, ate with our family members, met my parents, slept over my place. We prayed together at night. We shared many laughs and intimate conversations, and it was all an act. And we were so shaken up by it that we didn't know what to do. Like, what do you do? Imagine yourself, you're 18 years old, 19 years old. You find that one of your close friends was a police agent. Who are you going to call? The police? They're the
Oh my
ones who are
God,
doing
yeah.
it. They're the perpetrators. Are you going to tell your parents? No, you're not going to tell your parents. You have immigrant parents yourself. You come home with a B on your report card, and your parents are going to panic, right? Imagine coming home and saying, I'm being spied on by the police. No, I'm not going to terrify my parents. Like, so who do you call? All we had was each other. And that first week was really, really traumatizing for us.
That is a crazy story for so many reasons, but it's just so sinister to me to target such a young group of people who are so obviously trying to do good, people who are going to pray and handing out assistance to people who need it and really trying to find their place in their community, in their country, to be civic minded, and to enter that community and to take advantage of the trust and the hospitality. It really sent shivers down my spine. And especially when I first read the story and now to hear you recount it. So I can't even imagine the sense of betrayal. And you're right. It's like, who do you call? These are the people who are supposed to be protecting us. So did you ever find out why he confessed? Do you think he felt guilty because of how good you were to him, that he was like, wait a minute, what am I doing?
Wonderful question. It's one that I've been thinking about for a very long time, and it helps to give you some context about his life because he truly was somebody that needed help. He was not a police officer. And this is one thing I hope that listeners understand, is that the people who were recruited for the most part to conduct these surveillance investigations were everyday people like you and me, whom the police took advantage of. So he was caught, if I recall, on drug possession charges, and the NYPD basically told him, either you go to jail or you do this surveillance for us, right?
Wow.
And he did what most people would do in that circumstance, because nobody wants to go to jail. And like I said, he was struggling with mental health issues, drug abuse problems, obviously kicked out of school. So this is the profile of a person who is isolated and who needs help. They need jobs training. They need counseling. They need medication. And we have all the money in the world to provide these things, right? The richest city in the richest country in the world. But the police instead took advantage of him. And I think he snapped. Maybe it wasn't out of benevolence towards us. Maybe it was out of a desire to break from the shackles that the police had put him into. But he snaps and he confesses. And his confession, whether he realizes it or not, changed the course of New York City history. Because after that confession, I got a message from some lawyers at CUNY. It's the City University of New York. It's New York City's public university system, specifically CUNY Law School, that called me and said they wanted to meet me in their offices because they were working on a lawsuit to sue the NYPD. And they didn't tell me that in the beginning of the meeting. They first heard my story. And at the end of it, they were like, okay, we called you here because we're working on this. And we want you to be a plaintiff, meaning we want to represent you as your lawyers for free, right? There's no money involved here, because we want to eliminate or abolish what we believe is an unconstitutional surveillance program. And again, I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a 19-year-old, right? Community college student who has never met a lawyer in his life before. So I'm sitting in a room, and I've never dealt with attorneys, let alone civil rights attorneys. These are things that I read about in textbooks, right?
Right.
All the adults in my life were like cab drivers, construction workers, bodega workers, these working class blue collar jobs. Like I said, my own father, no college education, worked a blue collar job as a security guard at the time and became a concierge. So I'm like, this is a whole new world for me. I don't know if I want to sign up for this. I don't know what you're making me sign up for. So at first I didn't
Scary.
agree.
Yeah.
I didn't agree to it. I was like, you want me to fight the world's largest police department? That's crazy. So they gave me some time to think about it. They said, take 2 weeks, come back. It took 2 weeks. I came back. And when I come back, there are more lawyers in the view. And they're representing an organization called the American Civil Liberties Union, the ACLU. And they say, Asad, this is going to be a federal case. We're going to fight it in a federal courtroom. And we're hoping to set a precedent for the whole country. And the ACLU is going to have your back. So it wasn't just like a local case with one law, legal clinic out of a law school. It was going to be the ACLU, the country's largest civil liberties and civil rights firm. And so I signed up, and we eventually launched the lawsuit on June 18th, 2013. I was 20 years old. I gave a big speech in front of the NYPD headquarters. And the sequence of events is really, really interesting, or funny, depending who you ask, because within 2 hours or 1 hour of me giving that big speech, I was on my way to the airport because I was going to make Umrah, the minor pilgrimage, with my mother and my sister in Mecca. And I was really worried that the tabloids would frame it as, man sues NYPD, flees to Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Thank,
The optics
thankfully,
are not great.
yeah, they thankfully were not, and it was flying through Egypt, by the way. And, it was in the midst of the Arab Spring. So thankfully, they were not smart enough to frame it on those terms. I definitely would have if I was like the New York Post.
Mhm.
Sorry, I forgot one thing. The moment I gave my passport to the guy at the kiosk to check us in, he put out a nervous smile when he looked at it. And I was like, what's going on? And it turned out I had the quadruple S on my boarding pass, the SSSS,
Yeah.
secondary selective security screening. So you get that little extra pat down. And I was like, wow, they already got wind of this, of our lawsuit that I'm getting. It hasn't even been an hour. But I guess the authorities were already aware that it was going to happen. We make our pilgrimage, then we're flying back, and we're flying through Cairo International Airways. So Egypt is our transit. And it's just a couple of days before the military coup that overthrew
Right.
the Morsi government, where literally everyone's leaving the country. So we managed to get out. We land in JFK in New York. But then when we land in JFK, nobody's getting off the plane. The plane is just parked.
Okay.
And it's weird because I'm like, what's going on? And then I realize that there are federal agents at the gates of the plane. And as people are getting off one at a time, they're checking passports, which is normally not the case. You're getting off the plane, no one's checking your passport at the door of the plane
Yeah, I've never
as
seen
you're
that
getting.
before.
It's
Yeah.
it's weird. But they're checking everyone's passport because they were looking for me.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So my sister was in front of me on the line and they saw her passport and they asked, are you with anybody? And I'm like, yeah, she's with me. And they all look, it's like a movie scene. They all look at each other like, we've got our man. And so they take me, my sister, and my mom into like a waiting room where people who are going to be interrogated are kept. It was all brown people in there.
Obviously. Yeah.
And there was one like Greek guy in there that I felt really bad for because I was like, I know he's only there so they wanted to make it seem like they're not being racist. Get him out of here. He doesn't
There's always
belong
like
here.
the one redhead in the
Yeah.
line.
And I'm like, Masakin, get them out of here. Honestly, none of us should have been in there, but I feel like dark humor is the best way to cope with these things. And they
Sure.
kept us for like 3 hours, 4 hours. We got out and my dad picks us up. My dad didn't make the trip because he had to work. So he picks us up and he says, guess who called while you were away? I said, the NYPD. He says, no, the FBI. And so the
Oh my
NYPD and the
gosh.
FBI were now retaliating against the Muslim community by targeting me specifically, making me kind of the example or trying to make me the example for the rest of the community. And so the next couple of months and years were spent not just dealing with the local police department, but the federal agencies that were also collaborating with the local department to violate our constitutional rights. And eventually, my lawyers call the agent that got in touch with my dad and basically tell them to leave me alone. But then the agents start going after my friends. I had an undocumented friend. He was basically abducted by federal agents who basically took him to a correctional center and said, we know your friend is suing the police. If you spy on him for us, we can get your legal papers. And if you refuse, we might have to deport you. So he got put into this
Wow.
position. And believe it or not, he refused. He said, I'm not doing it.
Wow.
And they did try to deport him and they failed. And he was granted permission to stay by the judge. So he won the right to stay, but he was so shaken up by it that when he got out of this detention, he asked if we could part ways because he was worried they would come after him again due to our friendship. Right.
And
And
this was
so
what year?
the Obama era. So this is before President Trump is even an idea, right? Trump doesn't announce till August 2015 that he's running for president. This is January, February 2014, something like that. So for our listeners, this moment is new, but it's also in many ways it echoes things that we've seen in the past, right? I don't want to
Absolutely.
I don't want to minimize right now because there are new things that we're unprecedented challenges that we're dealing with, but I also don't want to exceptionalize it either. There are continuities.
No, absolutely. I'm actually right now writing an article for a think tank in Washington, D.C. about this exact topic, about
Mm,
how so much of what we're seeing today is a result of multiple U.S. administrations
hmm
expanding their powers, revoking people's rights, going above the law, going around the law, and no one really at a high level ever being held accountable for any of
Right.
those things. Every era, I guess, has its different iteration, but the core issue, which is violations of civil rights, violations of international law, they all stem from the same thing, which is a lack of accountability. And
Yeah.
so that brings me to the question I want to ask you about the story you just told us. Has anyone ever been held accountable at a high level for everything that happened to you? Or was it lower level people who are scapegoated, or was no one held accountable? I mean, obviously you
Excellent
got your
question.
settlement, right? But structurally, what changed?
Great questions. I will say that that was a dark period of the lawsuit. Obviously it ends on a positive note because I'm here and I'm talking about it with you. So 2015 and 2016 is where we kind of inched more towards a settlement. Ironically, and maybe partly because of Trump announcing that he's running for president, we saw a wellspring of kind of progressive support for Muslims on the grassroots level. People saying that he does not represent who we are. And I remember we reached a settlement deal. So for our listeners, we did not sue for money. We sued for policy change. If we sued for money, I'd be in the Bahamas right now, or in Puerto Rico or somewhere. I'm a struggling small business owner and university lecturer because we sued for policy change. We did the noble thing. We got about 6 or 7 uh, policy changes in the books, and I can give you some of those.
Yeah, please.
And those were finally signed into law in 2017. I think they were signed into law at the time of Trump's first administration. One of the policy changes we got was the elimination of the radicalization report, which is a report that was released in 2007 detailing signs of radicalization among Muslims. So this
Wow,
report
yeah.
would
Mhm.
identify like wearing a hijab or
Yeah.
going sober, not drinking or smoking, or discussing politics. These like everyday things that you might find in someone of a Muslim background. Growing your beard out.
I remember that era. Yeah.
That report was on a New York City government website. So our taxes were paying for this report to be featured on an official government website. So our lawsuit eliminated that report. You can't find it on government websites anymore, thank God. There was a stipulation that said that NYPD can no longer conduct a surveillance investigation where race, religion, or ethnicity are substantial or motivating factors. And you think this was something already on the books, but no, um, we got that in the books. So if you're going to spy on somebody, race, religion, and ethnicity cannot be your motivations for it. So that doesn't just protect Muslims; it protects all of us. And
Right.
I was really proud, really proud of that. Um, and if you conduct an investigation that doesn't find you any leads after 6 months, you have to terminate the investigation, right? So the informant that was with my friend's circle was with us for 7 months, more than the limit. We got the appointment of a civilian monitor, a civilian representative. So someone who's unaffiliated with the police, has no record of working with the police in the past, who's a lawyer who oversees the NYPD's compliance with some of these
That's
new
incredible.
safeguards. His name is Muhammad Faridi. He's Pakistani American. He grew up in the same neighborhood as me. He's a lawyer who has no and the stipulation is that the lawyer and the monitor has to never have had any affiliation with any police agency in the past, because that would
Yeah.
compromise him. And this person is appointed by the mayor every 5 years, and we meet with him, every few months or so just to ensure that he's doing his job. So there's a chain of accountability. But to answer your question more directly, the individual who came up with the radicalization report, he's been promoted to newer jobs. He's an adjunct lecturer at Columbia. You're not seeing any sort of accountability. Former Mayor Bloomberg, who oversaw the surveillance, ran for president in 2020.
Yeah.
And I was contacted by the Washington Post to publish an article about that. The title is Mayor Bloomberg Spied on Me for Being Muslim. He still hasn't apologized. Till this moment, as of today, November 20th, 2025, at 11:37 a.m., there have been no apologies made by the former mayor, by the NYPD, or really by anyone who was responsible for overseeing this. Policy settlement means that both sides agree, okay, this is what will change, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will admit to wrongdoing. They've never admitted to wrongdoing.
Yeah.
In fact, Bloomberg spent millions of dollars trying to stymie the election victory of the now mayor-elect Zohran Mamdani. So not only did he refuse to apologize, he's also attempting to use his wealth and influence to stop the election of a now incoming Muslim mayor.
Gosh, I feel like your life should be a movie. I don't know if you
We're
have that
working on it.
idea already.
We're working on it.
I'm sure I'm not the first person to tell you that. You are obviously someone who has made their mark on New York history and inadvertently. I mean, you certainly didn't ask for it.
Yeah, it wasn't my choice.
It wasn't your choice, but you leaned into it. You got these policy changes enacted. As you mentioned, those policy changes are beneficial not just to the Muslim community or any one minority community. It's a human rights issue, it's a civil rights issue. I'm guessing that's what you meant when you wrote that article in 2017 when you said, I have more hope than ever. Now, at that point, once the lawsuit was settled and you got all these policy changes, any person in your position could have done one of two things. One is just say, I'm so glad that's over. I never want to deal with anything related to politics or religion or anything. I just want to go live a normal life and forget this ever happened. Or you can really lean into it and say, I'm going to continue working to change this city and
Yeah.
to work for people in this city. And you very obviously took the latter route. You've been described in the media as someone who was part of Zohran Mamdani's quote unquote kitchen cabinet, an informal advisor. You obviously did a lot of
You did your
work.
homework.
I always do my homework. Come on.
Great. Love it.
But I wanted to understand how deliberate were your choices? Like when you decided, okay, I'm going to now go and try to make the city a better place for everyone to live. Did you have an idea or a sense of what that meant? Or I'm sure never in a million years you would have imagined advising the first Muslim mayor of New York City. But
Yeah.
did you have an idea of what you wanted to do or how you wanted to make things better for people like yourself and for New Yorkers in general? Or was it kind of a trial and error period?
A little bit of both, I would say. I'm a quintessential millennial in that we don't really have a fixed career trajectory. We do, right? It's just trying to figure things out along the way. It was also intentional in some respects because when I finished college, I started off at CUNY, I finished at NYU, and I was a major in social work with a focus on community organizing. So a lot of the kind of social work that I did was, focusing on uplifting communities. And this was during the course of the lawsuit. This was before we had even settled it. I decided after graduating that I want to work in service professionally. For Muslim communities, racial and ethnic and religious minorities, and to really add upon the work that I had already done in the lawsuit as in my individual capacity. And I leaned into that. Like you said, I said, I'm not going to allow my experience with the NYPD to define the city or to define my relationship with the city. The way I
Yeah,
think of New York is a microcosm of America in many ways. There are so many competing New Yorks, just like there are so many
true.
competing Americas. And I think it's my responsibility as an American born citizen, as a child of immigrants who moved here for opportunity, to embody the vision of New York and of America that I think best exemplifies the higher ideals that we're supposed to be about. And my work called me to do that. My vision of being a New Yorker called me to do that, right? I'm blessed to say that I live in the most diverse city in the world, the most culturally vibrant city in the United States. And I think there's a responsibility that comes with that. We're always called to something greater. Part of it is my faith that
Yeah.
tells me that I need to do something that's bigger than myself. So there was definitely some deliberation in the grand scheme of things, but in the granular day to day, that can vary, right? That can be working on developing a new walking tour. That can be giving a lecture. That can be showing up to this podcast. That can be talking to a mayoral candidate or a candidate for state assembly or city council, or the granular stuff can vary, but kind of the macro vision is always going to be that.
And, speaking of mayoral candidates, after Mamdani got elected, you reposted something you shared on August 2024. And it was a
Mm.
photo of you and Zohran Mamdani. And you
Yes.
said, You
Do you
said,
have the caption? Do you have
I
a
I
tool?
do. Yeah. You said I had a very productive meeting today with Democratic Socialist State Assemblyman Zohran Mamdani in Greenwich Village this afternoon. I can't say much, but politics in the world's most influential city are about to get a lot more exciting. Keep an eye on this Muslim socialist. You said that in August 2024. What did you see in him back then that led you to write something like this post and be so confident that something exciting was going to happen and that things were going to change?
So that meeting took place because Zoran wanted to chat with me about his mayoral candidacy and his viability and who he needs to speak to and what he needs to do. And we spoke a lot about the Muslim community in particular because that's where a lot of my knowledge base and expertise and upbringing was. But we also spoke broadly speaking about like fundraising.
Mm,
And eventually he and I both knew Cuomo was going to enter the race. And this is August. Zoran doesn't announce till October. Cuomo doesn't enter the race till March of the next year. So we were preparing well in advance for all of these things that we knew were eventually going to happen. I don't think either he or I believe that he would actually win it at that point. But he wanted to give it a shot, and he sensed that there could be a path to victory here. Even if it were a slim path to victory, it was there. And I think what I saw in him is a genuineness and an authenticity. And I'm not just saying that because
mm-hmm.
we're friends. I can say I hung out with the guy before he became a global icon. And
Yeah.
now I know him as a global icon. And I'll say he's still the same person. People change when that fast fame comes to them, right? Oftentimes the fame takes over. It gives you an ego trip. You turn into somebody else, and I don't see that in him. I see him still being the same kind of down to earth, fuzzy, funny, sweet, gentleman that I had known from the very beginning. The fact that the fame hasn't gotten to his head and has kept him grounded, I think, is a really remarkable thing. And I saw that in him from the very beginning. But this is a guy that knows how to talk to people. He's a socialist, right? And at that time, there's a, I guess, a popular perception of socialists, especially young social activists, and I count myself among them, as being unable to communicate with a wider audience, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
perhaps being too inwardly focused. Zoran showed me that he was somebody that would walk into uh, a mosque in deep Queens or deep Brooklyn, and fit seamlessly into the community, but he could also walk into a nightclub, in Bushwick and fit seamlessly with the community there. And he could walk into a room full of business executives, 40 of them sitting at a table waiting for him to take a seat, and he'll fit seamlessly into there as well. On this coming Friday, he's going to be meeting with Donald Trump.
That's
And I
right.
made a tweet. I made it last night, paraphrasing myself. Trump and Mamdani are going to meet at DC this Friday. I want someone in the media to frame it as Queens man meets Queens man, because they're both from Queens, right?
Right.
Both New Yorkers. And to understand both Donald Trump and Zoran Mamdani, you need to understand the city that gave us both of them, right? Trump is a consequence of New York's two industries in New York: real estate and show business.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
Zoran is a product of parents who are also in two huge industries or professions in New York: cinema and academia. His mother is filmmaker. His father, Columbia academic. They're both shaped by the culture and politics of New York City. Yes, they come from different generations, different time periods, different circumstances, but it's really, you can only have a Zoran Mamdani and a Donald Trump within New York City. How they came into being, you have to understand the city. Zoran, so just to bring it back to your question, when I sat with him and I saw him, I saw somebody who understood New York, who had a vision for New York, and who was able to communicate his love for the city to a New York audience. And he won over 1 million votes. It's really remarkable.
It was incredible. The number of people who voted, the excitement. And you're right. He is someone who appears authentic no matter who he's talking to. And I think we've missed that in
Mm.
politics. But what's so interesting about him meeting with Trump tomorrow is actually Trump is not unlike that. in a very different way.
Exactly.
Part of the reason why so many people voted for Trump is part of the reason why they voted for Mamdani is because they both really appeared to be authentic, to not change faces depending on who they're talking to not consult with pollsters and focus groups before they say 5 sentences. And we had just been, and I think people were so tired of these scripted politicians, both on the
Hmm.
left and on the right. So here you
Hmm.
are, you have these two men, one on the left, one on the right, who are meeting, but who have so much in common in a sense. And when I was trying to think about what they represent, I'm going to tie this into another question I wanted to ask you about people's misgivings about Mamdani, because I think we should give some space to talk about things that people are worried about. I always like to think that when someone has a concern, at least at the beginning, you should give them the benefit of the doubt and treat that concern as valid until they prove to you otherwise. When you look at Trump versus Mamdani, it's not necessarily like old guard versus new guard, is it? It's not Trump represents dinosaurs and Mamdani is the future. I mean, some people are thinking about it like that, but I wonder if it is closer to what you just said, which is both of these men embody a part of New York, and maybe the way forward is trying to find a way, build a New York that includes all different kinds of people and not make it a zero-sum situation. Am I oversimplifying or being too naive when I say that? Because I don't know how you want to frame the discussion between them and the two visions of the two men. Can they be accommodated in one city? Can they
Mm,
be accommodated across the country, these two different visions?
mm.
Or are people going to have to choose in the end between one and the other?
Great question. Wonderful question. I've been teaching an IM PhD, of course, on this question. To your first point about like old guard versus new guard, I will say that that paradigm is more apt with Cuomo and Mamdani,
Okay.
not so much with Trump. I feel like Andrew Cuomo very much with the embodiment of the old guard and old form of patronage politics and traditional kind of backdoor deals that have characterized, you can say America, but New York more specifically in many ways. He enters in March of this year into the race. The primaries in June. He thinks in just 2 months he can just, kind of
Yeah.
waltz in and he'll be the mayor, right? There was very little campaigning by his side. He had some backdoor meetings with some unions and some executives. That was about it. It was an old form of politics where it doesn't involve talking to everyday people. And Zoran was the very opposite of that. Every day he's out on the street, literally every single day. Right now, as I'm talking to you, he's probably somewhere out on the street. It's really remarkable. And it's, a guy wakes up 6, 7 o'clock in the morning. And I know he's not always sleeping early either because he's taking
Yeah.
meetings late into the night, strategizing. Like I would post Instagram stories and I would see him viewing my stories at like midnight. In my
Mm.
mind, I'm like, brother, you got to be
Go
at
sleep.
press conference. Zoran, if you're listening to this, it's all love. I love you. But yeah, so that paradigm is Cuomo and Mamdani. Trump is, it's unfortunate that people like Trump have been a part of New York for a very long time. But this is the city that gave the world Zohran Mamdani and Bernie Sanders. Bernie, who, by the way, is native Brooklynite. And this is also the city that gave the world Wall Street and Donald Trump. Both of those things have existed at the same time. And I would say that we are confronted with a choice as New Yorkers and as Americans whose vision will win out. And in some cases, to be very blunt, it is mutually exclusive in some cases.
Hmm.
Trump wants to deport immigrants in mass. That is mutually exclusive with the vision that Zoran has, which is very much built around an immigrant city, right?
Of course. Yeah.
That is something I think, as far as accommodation is concerned, we can't do, right? He wants to persecute his political enemies, use the pulpit of the presidency to extract vengeance. I think that something is mutually exclusive with Zoran's agenda and what he stands for. But there are things that aren't. For example, the one other thing that Trump really advocated for is for reducing costs of living for everyday people. Now, did he execute on them? Absolutely not, right? He's cutting SNAP benefits. He's gutting the welfare state, right? But he campaigned on it. He said he
Yeah.
wants to be a man of the working people. In reality, that's not the case. But that's something that Trump campaigned for, that Zoran also campaigned for. And Zoran says this himself in his interviews. He says, these two other things, we're not going to compromise on the immigration and the persecuting of political enemies. We're going to take a stand against that. But affordability, let's work together. And I guarantee you this, tomorrow when they meet, that is what Zoran is going to stress. He's going to say, you're from New York. I'm from New York. You care about New Yorkers. I care about New Yorkers. Let's find a common ground, at least on this. Right.
Yeah.
And I think that's where, you're going to see an interesting overlap, because in the United States, and I know you have listeners all over the world, and in London and other parts of Europe and the Middle East. In the United States, our governmental structure, it's very federated. If you want to pass certain policies in the city, you need state funding and you need federal funding. That means you need collaboration with the governor
Mm-hmm.
and even the
Mm-hmm.
president. You want to
Mm-hmm.
pass Zoran's most ambitious agenda for universal childcare for everyone, you're going to need presidential government federal funding for that stuff. And so that requires some level of cooperation with Donald Trump. That requires some level of cooperation with Governor Kathy Hochul. And I think Zoran is playing his cards because he was the one who reached out to Trump. Trump didn't reach out to him. His office, Mamdani's office, reached out to Trump and said, hey, let's meet. So Zoran is the one who
Interesting.
put the card down first and said, hey, I'm playing my cards here. Let's chat. So
Yeah.
this is someone who, like you said, he'll talk to anybody to get his agenda passed. And that's important because New York requires you to be this person who's willing to engage.
No, absolutely. The question I was asking you earlier about zero sum and whether the city is big enough for everyone. Obviously, I wasn't talking about the visions and the policies that you mentioned of Trump's, like
Right.
immigration and anything really related to justice, equality, human rights. I
Hmm.
was more talking, I guess, to if I were to categorize, I live in London now. I'm a New Yorker, but I live in London. By the way, my father also immigrated to Brooklyn, so I feel like there's a real
Overlap.
Brooklyn connection over here. But I guess I looking at it from the outside, there are a couple of major categories of people who are worried
Yeah.
about Mayor Mamdani. One group or one set of concerns is about how he's going to be treating the wealthy. If I'm a
Business
billionaire,
executive. Right.
business executive, if I'm a CEO, is this mayor going to come after me now? Is this going to be a place where I can do business, or should I leave? And of course, the other one, which I know you had been doing a lot of work on outreach to the Jewish community in New York City. You even took Brad Lander and his family on one of your
Yeah.
tours, and you posted about it, which I thought was so sweet. He seems really down to earth. The part of the Jewish community that felt nervous. I wanted to hear from your perspective as an insider
Yeah.
how you assess Mamdani's outreach to these different communities. And moving forward, I'd love to also get your sense of what do you think the toughest challenges are going to be in the first year? And how are you thinking about how to approach those challenges if you are advising him? Because there was so much damage done in this mayoral campaign on so many levels. There was rampant anti-Muslim hate and Islamophobia. There were below the belt attacks. There were fears from the Jewish community. There was weaponized anti-Semitism. I mean, his part of it was beautiful and joyful and inclusive, but in a way, everything around him, it was a really ugly campaign in a lot of ways, I would say.
Great questions. I will say that Zoran is embodying a vision that says, I will talk to and work with anyone, but I am not going to budge on my outcomes. And my
Mm-hmm.
outcomes are affordability for New Yorkers. So if you're a business executive, you don't have to worry as long as we are not clashing on those outcomes. New York needs people who are in business. This is a business oriented city. It's
Right.
been part of our character for 4 centuries. I teach a class on New York City history at university, and we start in the 1600s and we're going to end now with the election of Zoran. And if there's like one defining characteristic of New York is that this has always been a commercial entity, even from the colonial era. So if you're a business executive, you really have no reason to worry. Nobody's going to leave New York. New York is the economic capital of the United States and probably the world. All of the world's top businesses are here. They're all invested in the city's
Yeah.
well-being. What Zoran is saying is not, you business executive, get out of here, go to Tampa or Miami or whatever it is. He's saying, that's a big table you got. there's room for all of us on it, right? Can we
Yeah.
share it? That's what he's saying. And I think that's a message that has, I think, successfully disarmed many of his critics because they're realizing that he's actually much more open to working with them than they even thought.
Mhm.
That a little bit more of distributive policies are not going to harm your business. In fact, it might even generate more business because if I can afford my rent and my groceries, then I can afford to participate in more economic activity outside of
Sure.
that. So you have to understand that when you make a city work for everyone, you're allowing people to generate more economic growth and opportunity
Yeah.
for everybody else. It increases rather than decreases economic competition. So that's the business side of it. Then there's what you had mentioned about concerns or worries on parts of Jewish New Yorkers. He said from day one that he is going to be a mayor for all people. That includes people who disagree with him on Israel Palestine. His policies are going to be based on what's best for the city and what's best for everyone in the city. And that includes people who may not have voted for him, includes people who may not like him or agree with him. It's common sense, of course, but it's a powerful gesture for him to say that outright and say, look, I'm not here to fight with you on your perspectives on the Middle East. I'm still your mayor. You are still my constituent. And I want to make sure that you can afford to live here too. And no anti Semitism or Islamophobia will be tolerated in New York at all. He's going to come out forcefully anytime any Islamophobia or anti-Semitism surfaces. He's going to come out forcefully against it, and he's not going to allow any of that to fester in this town. And he's done a great job. He's doing outreach to not just Brad Lander's set of Jewish New Yorkers, right, liberal left-wing Jews, but also the Hasidic communities of Brooklyn. He got support from the Satmar sect in Williamsburg, and he continues to do outreach to others. And it's really a matter of time before I think everyone comes around to recognizing that this is a genuine person who does care about you, no matter who you are or where you come from. And I think folks just need to be willing to give him a chance. Governing starts on January 1st, 2026, and he will prove himself to everyone.
Yeah. It's a very human thing to worry about your safety, to worry about your place in your community. I really understood that on so many levels. I hope that we'll see people starting to come together next year to move away from some of the division and the vitriol that we saw over the last few months. I have high hopes that it's New York. I was talking to my husband earlier and telling him about this interview and your story. And he said this interview is kind of like a love letter to New York because,
Yeah,
it's the two of you. You guys are both New Yorkers. You're both coming from immigrant backgrounds, and everything that you're going
exactly.
to be talking about is the testament to New York and the
Mm,
greatness of New York. I thought it was really sweet. Okay, well, listen, I know we went through a lot, and I really appreciate your time. Like I said, I think you embody everything that is wonderful about New York, and so I was really happy to have this conversation with you. I hope everyone who's listening checks out your tours and takes one of your tours when they're in New York. I'm going to put the link in the episode notes. And
great.
I hope
Thank
to
you.
see you when I'm in New York soon.
Yeah, yeah. Well, thank you. Thank you, Jasmine, for having me. Indeed, this was a love letter to New York City, and I'm grateful to co-write this letter with you. And for those who are listening, my walking tour company is called New York Narratives. I'm a storyteller, not just by profession, but by temperament, and I would love to walk the streets of New York with you one of these days and to tell those stories. Thank you so much, and I hope to be on here again next year.
Thank you, Asad. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
I hope you found that conversation insightful and learned some things you didn't know before. If you'd like to support our work moving forward, please don't forget to follow us wherever you get your podcasts, subscribe to our videos on YouTube, and leave a comment and review to make sure we know what you're thinking. You can also always email us at jasmine@viewfromherepod.com. That's jasmine@viewfromherepod.com. As always, thank you so much for listening. I'm Jasmine El Gamal, and this is The View From Here.